Cover. Like if someone's watching you, you like I misspell everything. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I just kind of finished our discussion early, so sign in.
Thanks a lot. And thanks, Scott. I just hit got it for live streaming, right? Right. Now, do I need to unhost you? All right. I can now. Great. Thanks so much, Scott. Hey, Scott. When I click on your name, the only option is PIN, P-I-N. I don't know what that means. Hey, Roland.
Hello.
How's everybody doing?
Doing good. How are y'all?
Good. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello. I'm sure I missed this somewhere, but when are we going back to in-person?
Well, it's because it's gone back and forth.
Okay. Because tonight when I couldn't log in, I was like, oh my gosh, is everyone sitting there? And I'm sitting in my office.
No, not yet. They're right now. It's just on hold until we hear further. Since
Okay.
Omicron came up, they put it on hold again.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Hey,
well, I'm glad
everybody.
y'all aren't all hanging out without me then.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Okay. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, David.
Hi.
Thanks for joining, everybody. Good to see everyone. It's been a while.
It has. It feels like it's been a long time.
My video going. I'm like,
Everybody have their bets now on the Super Bowl?
Well, you know who I'm going for. I'm from Cincinnati.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah, I was pretty excited.
I can't even tell you what teams are playing.
David, I know that the Bengals are playing only because a friend of mine is also from up there. So, Aaron, you're not alone.
I'm going for the home favorite, really. They should win, even though they're considered the away team in their own stadium.
Is that Los Angeles?
Rams, yeah, they're considered, they're going to be playing as the away team in their own stadium.
Really? Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting?
Yeah, so they were talking about what kind of uniforms they're going to wear, because normally they will wear, when they're playing at home, they will wear their home uniform, but technically they're going to be the away team in their own stadium.
Yeah. How,
Well, I guess we could get started whenever
Okay.
you're ready. I'm sorry, I haven't even pulled up the meeting yet. The slides. Give me 1 second here. Are you seeing the first page here?
I am.
there we go.
All right. Good evening or afternoon, and welcome to the February 7th, 2022 meeting of the City of Charleston's Design Review Board. My name is Erica Chase, the board's chairperson. Members of board with us tonight are Dinos Leolio, Aaron Stevens, Ashley Jackrell, Ben Whitener, and Stephanie Tillerson. I don't believe Andy Smith is joining us. I don't think
He's
signed
going
on.
to try. He could be late, but he's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andy Smith may be joining us at a later time. Members of city staff with us tonight are David Meeks, Andrea DeRungs, and then possibly Allison Hill DeLong. We do not have any board members recused from any agenda items, and we do not have any agenda items that have been deferred. The order of the meeting will be as follows. David will give a project introduction or context overview for any new projects. Then the applicant and team will make the project presentation. We typically limit those to about 10 minutes. If additional time is needed, please let me know at the start of your presentation. If everyone speaking could please state their name for the record. Then we will have time for board questions, and then we will open up the meeting for public comments. During the public comment period, that is also have a 10-minute time limit. And if everyone could please state their name and address for the record. I will also state who submitted letters to the board prior to the public comment period getting started. We will not read all of those in detail as they have been submitted to the board. The board has had time to review all of them. David will then give city staff recommendations, and then the applicant team may clarify or respond to any public comments or city staff comments with a 5-minute time limit. We will then have board discussion and a motion. During board discussion time, the applicant may only speak to clarify inaccurate information stated during board discussion, or if recognized by myself or one of the board members. If everyone could please silence or turn off all devices that may make noise during our meeting. And I do want to remind everyone that comments from the public are limited to site design and architecture only. Our board does not have authority over zoning issues such as land use, building density, flooding, or traffic. So with that, we will get started on agenda item number 1, 505 St. Andrews Boulevard, requesting after the fact partial demolition approval for a single family residence.
Thank you, Erica.
Yes.
This is David Meeks with an administrator for the Design Review Board. Just a couple context slides just to show everybody where this project is. 505 St. Andrews. Here's a closer view with the red and 505 St. Andrews. It's an existing home. from the 1950s, we believe. So because it is over 50 years old, it does fall into the purview. Demolition only falls under the purview of the DRB. This is an existing shot. And I believe the applicant will be going through more of the slides and we'll get an idea of the location. So with that, Rick, are you available, Mr. Blankenship?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
You're free to get started and tell us about the demo request, please.
All right. First of all, thank everybody for the service that y'all give to the city. Folks like you that keep us living in what I consider the best place to live in the Southeast, certainly. So this is a existing home, clearly single family home that my wife and I bought. We had some property down Poplar Grove way outside the city, and we've lived in Charleston for about 20 years previous to that. And anyway, she works at MUSC, and some of our kids are in school and stuff, and so it's time to come back to town. And we purchased this property, which had been a rental for close to 20 years. Lot of water damage due to the height of the slab itself, and then the previous poor drainage and things that have been taken care of on St. Andrews Boulevard. So with that being said, our thought process was always to keep it, and are keeping it as a single family home, but updating, keeping the existing structure, the four existing concrete walls. The inside of the house had over the past 10 to 15 years has flooded numerous times to the point of having flood claims drawn on it. The interior walls, once we started pulling into some things, a lot of water damage from years of neglect as a rental and things of that nature. So we started looking into that. The garage area from the original structure itself was an add-on, and so it is not of the block construction that the rest of the house is. So also with that, a lot of rot and water damage due to that, which obviously has been demoed. When we got to the roof, I had pulled originally a demo permit to do some of the rot, the water damage demo, and then it just continued to mushroom into more and more. And obviously, we got to the point while we had dumpsters and things of that nature, was going through those and went ahead and removed the roof. So that being said, I know that that's not certainly the way that things are supposed to go, but it is the way that it did go in this particular situation due to some availability to get the work done efficiently while we were there. So I've submitted to you guys. We've salvaged probably at least 50% of the original materials that's going to be reused in the rebuild of the roof, and then also have submitted drawings to expand the living space into the backyard for a couple of bedrooms and a couple of bathrooms. That's kind of an overview of everything. That the house was really in disrepair, I would say. We're leaving the stucco, we're leaving all the original components of the outside, and then just try to bring it up to date. I've talked to all of the adjacent neighbors, and then a couple others that are in the neighborhood as well that are more than happy to get involved with some approvals or their rubber stamp on what's being done and what's being proposed, and hoping to get this thing back up to par and have a nice homestead there 5 minutes away from MUSC where my wife works. That's about all I got thus far.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the board?
I'm just realizing I wasn't flipping through the slides. Do you want me to just kind of scroll through and show everybody the images?
Please,
So
that would
this
be
is-
helpful.
Yeah, this is the existing property, plan of survey. And the.
Can I comment on the existing survey?
Sure.
He's got another building under demolition, which obviously the whole building is not being demolished. Like I said, we're saving the existing structure itself, other than the garage, which from the previous owner I've been able to determine. I think he added that on there about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, which if you look at a couple of those pictures, that's the opened area with the rotted out wall space.
Mhm. So I'll just flip through the slides. The first grouping is obviously before the roof was removed. I apologize, some of these are quite blurry. That's all I had. And then this looks like when the work was first starting. And just a few shots around the building. That's a duplicate. And then after the demo started, that's what the rest of these are. And so this is some of the salvaged wood, correct, Rick?
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
We've got there's 3 different piles with anywhere from 40 to 50 pieces per, and then I've also got all of the interior doors salvaged.
So this is a diagram of the interior walls that were removed, which our board doesn't have purview over. But I did want to point out that there were a couple exterior walls on the lower portion of the plan that were removed. So that's really also part of the decision. I think I only said roof in the description, but it's also one of the exterior walls, which we would have purview over.
And that exterior wall is the addition of the garage, like that I was talking about, that literally had been underwater and trapped water for years and years and years. But yes, that is, but it's not a part of the original structure.
So that's it for the slides. Anything else, Rick?
No, obviously throwing myself at the board for doing more of the demo than I had originally permitted for. And it was just a situation where, we were into it, and the more we pulled off, the more, especially on the roof, there was the chimney, probably within a 8 to 10 foot area around it had been almost the sheathing on it was for the most part gone, and it just took on more of a project than we had originally started. And I think if we're able to, with all the drawings and the proposals and stuff that I've submitted, what was for the most part everyone that I've spoken to considered the place to be somewhat of an eyesore. It's sandwiched in between 2 really pretty classic West Ashley houses, and I think this will help on that little corridor there leading out of the town into West Ashley to really brighten things up there.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Only question I had was during the start of the demo process, once you started seeing the damage, was anyone from the city or an engineer called on site to document the damage?
No, I did have Raj Gupta come over, and he's been over there 3 times. Part of he has certainly viewed some of the damage, not all of it. Part of it was already gone before he got there. But no, I did not notify anybody from the city. But secondhand information, Raj, who's a structural engineer there in West Ashley, he's been over there numerous times.
Any other questions?
And so,
Curious what the structural Madam Chair, I had a question, Ben Whitener. I was just curious what the structural engineer had to say about the existing structure, the unreinforced masonry.
so the plan for that is that we're going to go through, he hasn't quite, obviously depending upon what gets approved as far as the drawings, but at a minimum, we're going to go through and reinforce 48 inches on center each cell with some reinforced number 5 rebar that is going to be bored into the existing footing and slab that's there. So, and then we're going to cap that with a bond beam that goes all the way around with one number 5 going through that. So, if the roof, the way that we've got it drawn, is acceptable, maybe the 48 inches. If not, then it'll go down to 36 inch or 36 inch filled cells all the way through. 36 inches on center. And then tied together at the top with the bond beam for the new rafters to sit on.
Any other questions from the board?
I have to unmute myself. Yes, Madam Chair. David, I have a question for staff. Is that okay for me to ask, Madam Chair?
Yeah, of course.
I was looking at kind of the description in terms of the purview of the board and talking about historical significance. Do you know if this house, and maybe you mentioned that, I'm sorry, has it gone through any structural changes over the years? Because it really looks different compared to the other homes along that street.
No, I am not aware of that. It sounds like Rick may have more knowledge of that. He mentioned an addition on the garage.
On the garage, but everything else is original to the house?
I believe so, but we don't do that much research into the house other than the age to determine if it's in our purview or not. But as far as additions and all that sort of thing, I really couldn't answer that.
Thank you.
So I can weigh in there with what information that I have via the 2 previous owners. If you're interested, or I can be quiet. You tell me what you want me to do.
I think this is the appropriate time unless anyone disagrees, since we're still on board questions. So go ahead.
Okay, so the garage was added. Like I said, it don't have the exact date, but within the last 25 years or so, the roof took a lot of damage from Hugo, and once we started pulling some of the things back, shockingly, that was the parts that had been redone and rebuilt were the ones that were the most deteriorated from water. Some of the parts that we encountered, especially around the chimney and stuff, those were areas that had been redone after Hugo. And if you notice, if you look at the site plan, the part along the back left on the survey, the part upon the back left is also block structure that was added on as a gardening storage area that was not to the original. Also, no one quite understands why. Obviously, the majority of everything in that area is brick, but this house, from what I've been told by a lot of old timers in the neighborhood, as well as people that were involved in owning it before, no one really quite understood why a block structure with stucco, and obviously the color is a little bit off compared to, but that has nothing to do with it, why that was put amongst those amongst those houses. So it's all, from what I understand, it's always been kind of a little redheaded stepchild over there.
Thank you. Any other questions? With none, will now enter into the public comment period. We did receive 2 letters from members of the public, both of which who will be speaking this evening also, but both Andrea Woodfield, who is, I think, the president of the Moreland Neighborhood Association, I believe, and then Donna Jacobs, who is the president of the ABD board, submitted letters opposed to the request. And I believe they will also be speaking. So I don't know if they've been let in yet, but I have Andrea Woodfield first to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great. Thank you for letting me speak today. Moreland has worked and continues to work diligently along with the Ashley Bridge District to preserve the character of the neighborhood, especially as its importance as one of the major gateways to and from the city of Charleston becomes more evident. We understand that the DRB issued a very specific and low impact permit to the new owners of 505 St. Andrews Boulevard. We also understand that the new owners completed work substantially beyond the scope permitted, and that the city of Charleston intervened and stopped the work before the entire building was demolished. Moreland is deeply concerned with an after-the-fact partial demolition permit being granted because precedent will be set. Our recommendation is to deny this request and to encourage the DRB and neighborhoods like Moreland to work together to set policy to prevent issues like this from happening in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Donna Jacobs.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the board. Before you this evening is a request to approve an after-the-fact partial demolition for 505 St. Andrews Boulevard. This request creates a true conundrum from everyone and hopefully initiates a robust discussion. It is our understanding that the city issued a very specific and low impact permit to the new owner of 505 St. Andrews Boulevard, and that the work was stopped at the site because it went beyond the scope permitted. It sounds like from hearing from the owner tonight that the applicant intends to return this home to an updated residential structure, but I would still like to read the rest of this letter into the record for consideration. We recognize how cumbersome it will be for this owner if this request is denied. However, we can't ignore the greater interests of the community that have been consistently conveyed since 1997, when the Ashley Bridge District Plan was approved by City Council. This concern about preserving the unique neighborhood characteristic was most recently conveyed again during the Plan West Ashley process and became part of the vision and implementation recommendations of this plan. West Ashley residents are strong on this point. Since there is currently no guidelines or review for residential structures along the commercial corridor or internally for that matter, the community is concerned that more of this structure was demolished than permitting allowed. Creating a snaggletooth look on St. Andrews Boulevard would start us down a road we have worked tirelessly to avoid. We're asking you to deny this permit and have the owner return the structure to a compatible residential design, which he indicates he will tonight. In addition, we are looking to staff to reinforce communications and guidelines during the permitting process for demolition requests within the ABD, and we're looking to the board to continue to push for design guidelines within our commercial corridors. We respectfully ask for 2 considerations: regulation over demolition by neglect and consideration for review of all new and renovated residential structures along the corridors. And I know that's outside of this permitting tonight, but I just would like to get it on the record that we're really looking for these sorts of things. Respectfully, Donna Jacobs, and I live at 6 Craven Avenue in Burns Downs, and I'm representing the Ashley Bridge District Board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next is Kate Campbell.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I've raised my hand, but I'm going to lower it here. Sorry. I'm Kate Campbell. I'm a resident of Moreland. I live at 736 North Godfrey Park Place, which is across the street and down from this property. As a resident of Moreland and previously of Avondale for over 17 years, the Ashley River Bridge District has worked very hard along with the city of Charleston to retain the character of the corridor neighborhoods in West Ashley that lead into and out of downtown Charleston. I echo Donna and Andrea's comments, and just wanted to point out as growth continues to expand and with upcoming projects like the pedestrian bridge across the Ashley River, which we're really looking forward to, the pressure to improve the structures along these corridors will only increase. Our neighborhoods are fast approaching the 100-year mark. And as a resident in this district, I think it would be prudent to take a good look at the process of approvals to avoid further confusion and unintended precedents. We certainly want folks to come in and renovate these structures. And so we need to make it clear and not easy, but just a good, clear process for doing so. But thank you to the board for your time and consideration. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. With that, the public comment period is closed and we are now into staff comments. Please, David.
Thank you, Erica. Some staff observations. The applicant had obtained a permit for partial roof removal and some interior walls. The partial roof removal was to accommodate a temporary power pole. The owner claims that the roof rafters had water damage, and this is why he continued to remove more of the roof. The owner should have, as he knows, revised this permit before continuing with demo. Right now, the only city action that was taken was that we charged double for the application fee. The city was notified by neighbors when the entire roof was removed. A stop work order was issued on October 11th, 21. The owner has waited until now to submit an after-the-fact demo request. Currently, there are no protections in this area for the city for demo requests such as this. We see this as an opportunity to work with the community towards a policy that would protect the homes in this area. The board doesn't have purview over the future plans of the residential building. Staff comment 1, the ordinance that discusses demolition in the purview of the design review board states that the board should consider architectural and aesthetic features of the structure, the nature and quality of the structure, including the architectural fabric, any historic significance, the nature and quality of the surrounding area, and the structure's contribution to the overall streetscape of that area. We feel the board has no other choice in this situation other than to have the owner replace the roof as it was. So unfortunately, staff does recommend denial of the full roof removal and advises that the roof be replaced in kind.
Thank you, David. With your motion, do we need to address the exterior wall demolition too? Is that in our purview, or are we just talking? Okay.
Yes, I should have added that in when I stated that earlier. So denial of the full roof removal and the exterior walls that were removed.
So just to be clear, those are the two items that we are focusing on and nothing else with regards to interior demolition or anything else.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, David. Mr. Blankenship, did you have anything you wanted to respond or clarify to either the public comments or the city recommendations?
So it's my understanding that the city is requiring me to build back what was there. Is that correct?
They are recommending that to be considered by the board. Our board has the final vote on this agenda item. So the city staff's comments and recommendations are to our board to review and discuss and vote on.
So my thoughts are, and what Ms. Jacobs said, the way that obviously this has unfolded is certainly on my shoulders as far as the overstepping of the allowable and permitted demolition. My thoughts are that much like all of us, I think, in any neighborhood, and certainly on any gateway neighborhood that the house that was there and the structure that was there was really in such ill repute. I would hope that the city would reconsider the recommendation that it be rebuilt back to the way that it was, for numerous reasons. That it doesn't have the size or the height or the square footage that any of its neighbors has. What I'm proposing is not, it's a 2,400 square foot, which is in line with all of the rest of that neighborhood. Obviously, there's some that's bigger, but I would hope that we could reconsider putting back what was there, because that what we're hoping and what we're proposing to do is just going to make the neighborhood and the overall look of going up and down St. Andrews far superior than what was there. I in no way ever want to overstep any type of and come in and make things worse as far as an eyesore or what a neighborhood, the character or the characteristics of a neighborhood are. And I don't think that my proposal is anywhere close to that. If anything, it's taking a piece of property that didn't fit anyway and making it more palatable for what the neighbors are around it. What I think it was Miss Woodfield said, again, I've got hat in hand for my egregious behavior as far as being overzealous on the demo, and I'd love to work with anyone in the Moreland community, certainly the ARB, if anything, if they have any input into it. But I just would highly request that what I've proposed is much more aesthetically pleasing to the neighborhood and to my adjacent neighbors as it is. And whatever I need to do to try to rectify the overzealousness of the demo, I'm certainly open to any of that. But in all reality, had I gotten the city involved or anything, and I certainly can get a third party that does have some information on what that roof, the shape that roof was in, as in Mr. Gupta, I can get him involved if needed to be. But that house had been sitting and as far as the exterior walls of the added-on garage, those literally were falling down. They did not have proper support. And also, to the point of the engineer, is it's still somewhat of a wonderment of what was there, how it was still standing, even as somebody asked earlier about the reinforcing of the concrete walls. So everything that I'm proposing to do is doing nothing but helping the community and overall the look of the neighborhood. And I really hope that this can be reconsidered. And again, whatever penalty that I need to incur for my overzealousness, then I'm open to that. But I really hope it's reconsidered.
Thank you. We are now in for discussion and a motion.
Madam Chair, this is Dinos Leolio. May I? Well, this is a very complex, if not very obviously sensitive exercise here, and I'm trying to put my arms around the specifics here, just to make sure that I understand from the standpoint of DRB where our jurisdiction lies. But if I may ask, it sounds like that demolition, to the extent that this has evolved to at this point, would have and should have come before the board to this degree, that the initial demolition permit that was provided was specific and for very low impact permitting, and consequently, because of the extent of demolition that has occurred, it would throw this into now a review. If this was proposed previously prior to the demolition, it would throw it back into the jurisdiction of the DRB. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. My understanding was that the city, someone in the permit office gave a demolition permit solely for a temporary power pole. David, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
So just a power pole, temporary power pole penetration into the roof. That is the extent of the permit issued. Is that correct, David?
Correct. Yeah, the permit
And
said
so-
nothing about water damage.
Okay,
So
I
let
believe
me make
then
sure
if the entire roof was proposed to be demoed and or an exterior wall, then that would have come before our board for demolition. My question, David, and not to interrupt you, Dinos, I apologize.
No.
Since it sounds like the rear portion that was demoed, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, was not 50 years or older, would that still fall
That's
on
a
our
good
purview,
point.
or just the roof?
I think if you're looking at the building on the right side where the garage was, is what Mr. Blankenship's indicating was less than 50 years old, and I was not aware of that. So if that is the case with that particular wall of the added-on garage, you're right, then it would not be in our purview, only the roof. Only the
Well,
portion that's 50 years old.
Yeah, I guess I would have to ask, first of all, when was the garage built? And number two, did it contribute or add to the aesthetic appearance and presentation of the building in that regard? And again, I'm assuming that those would be the questions that would come back to the DRB if the application had been made in the proper protocol. Would that be correct? That even the demolition of the garage would not have been allowed until the applicant came to the DRB for permission to do so?
I think the demolition of the garage, that would be correct, Dinos, if it is the garage portion is over 50 years old. Is that correct, David?
I'm thinking that if the, this is a new one to me.
I think,
I am
think
thinking,
I think what Dino said is correct. The garage itself may not have to be over 50 years old. If the structure is over 50 years old, but we determine that it's contributing to the house, and I think you consider that. Is that correct, Dave? I think it can define it as contributing to a historical structure.
I believe so. I think once any part of the structure is 50 years old, we kind of consider the entire structure. I think there's been some other buildings that we looked at which were
Yes.
over 50 years old, but they have been added on to, or you couldn't even tell which was part of the original structure, but we still were considering the entire structure.
Well, and there's a variety of other issues that I guess, and I feel for the applicant in this regard, but as he was making his presentation, there is the approval required with regards to compliance with all life safety and flood issues when you start beginning demolishing a rather significant portion of a structure, I guess using that 50% rule that typically is applied that we're familiar with. So I guess what's happened here is that there is a breach of trust with regards to the issuance of the specific and low impact permit and what has evolved at this point. And are we getting into a situation here? And it truly worries me that if we grant the approval at the request of the applicant, then this board has been very, very adamant and judicious in reviewing demolition packages that come before us in this specific neighborhood and have created a rather significant and hard line with regards to what is allowed with respects to demolition. And I'm struggling now. I'm assuming that the applicant is familiar with construction, is familiar with permitting, is familiar with the manner in which the city of Charleston works, and consequently would and should have understood that anything beyond what was requested, a power pole through the roof of a building, would constitute a breach of what was allowed as far as his permit was concerned. And by virtue of taking it down to the extent that it was, worries me greatly. I am of the opinion that the position of staff, as painful as it might be, is probably the most appropriate as far as this board is concerned, and I would certainly support it, just my opinion. But again, I think it's important to note, and this is the clarity that I was looking for, is that a simple power pole through the roof, which stipulates a specific and low impact permit, would be allowed because there would be no other demolition. But if the demolition that was proposed would extend to the manner in which the building has been treated, with the removal of all the roof, with the removal of walls, then in fact, prior to that demolition, it would have come back to this board for review and approval. And that's, I guess, where I'm drawing my line at.
That's correct.
Thank you, Dinos. Any other comments?
Madam Chair, this is Ben Whitener. I agree. I think, the simple, quaint building, it adds to that street. I drove by there today. There's been so much demolition done. I think it's going to be a challenge, even when we say to build the roof back and to rebuild the garage. I mean, it's going to be challenging for the contractor, the owner. I mean, there's structural issues on that house that that they're going to have to address. It's going to be a challenge. And if it's in a flood area, I don't know, that what Dinos is saying is absolutely right. If you're manipulating more than 50% of the value in a flood area, then it's got to be brought up to code, brought up to 2 feet above the flood line, base flood. So it could be a challenge for this owner to build back what's been demolished. I'm with you. I'm with everybody on that. I just think it's going to be a challenge dealing with the city and structural engineer, the architect. I agree that they should not have demolished as much as they have, but that unreinforced masonry is going to be a challenge. You could tell there's differential settlement all around the building. But I agree with staff. I think a denial is appropriate.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair, I have some more questions if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead, Ashley.
I believe that there was mention at one point of an expansion on the back side of the house, and that was the reason for the pitch of the roof shifting. What entity, assuming things had all gone according to plan and the applicant had applied for their demolition permit appropriately through the DRB, and that was granted for the roof portion of the structure, who would have been the entity to approve the plans for the future addition of the project?
Currently, there is no one who does that.
Just the city building department. No one's looking at it from an aesthetic.
Yeah, correct. Only code and so forth, but not aesthetic.
So that would have been a staff level approval.
Not from DRB, just from the building department, purely looking at code.
Correct.
So in terms of the to confirm I understand it correctly, the applicant would have requested demolition. We would not necessarily have seen plans for the next part of what was planned. That would have been sent to staff for direct approval or denial.
When you say staff, are you referring to DRB?
It depends on the staff you're referring to.
City staff.
We would only, pardon?
City staff.
Building department.
The building department only. They're only looking at it from a code perspective. They are not looking at, it would not go to David or anyone on DRB staff, looking at it from a design or aesthetic standpoint. If that makes sense, Ashley.
It does, thank you.
Okay.
And then another question kind of directed towards David. The ordinance talking about architectural and aesthetic features and historic significance. What were those which led you to recommend the denial of the full removal of the roof?
Well, it has more to do with the city process, which I actually think it's lacking. The fact that we're not allowed to look at future plans for the structure, I don't know how we're able to effectively make a decision on partial roof removal if we're not able to see the plans for the future building. So I saw no other choice other than, and then, listening to the neighborhood associations as well, that they're pretty adamant on not wanting to see this approved.
So my concern with that is that we are stepping outside of our purview, because if the decision is solely to be made based off of the historical character and the architectural significance of this property, and looking back and ignoring the procedure of how things really did play out, I don't know that we wouldn't have wound up where we are today. Obviously, it would have been better if the proper channels had been followed. At the same time, I understand that the best way to preserve buildings is to have people in them, and an owner who is actively engaged in the care of that property. And that makes this challenging, because you want to see properties that are well taken care of and revitalized. And it seems like they were on the way to doing that here. And the decision to deny the after the fact demolition is more about a punishment as opposed to the way that we're supposed to be making this decision. And to me, that means that as a board, we're stepping outside of our purview. I hear Donna when she says that this is a process that we're lacking. I completely agree. I know that that's in the works, and I'm going to follow up with the staffer who is taking charge of that as far as design guidelines for the corridor, because I think that's something that we would have that would be of value. And unfortunately, there's not the ordinance doesn't grant us the authority to punish the homeowner by saying that we don't want to approve based off of a parameter that's not part of the ordinance that enables us to make these decisions. So that I have a lot of heartburn for that reason.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head.
David, may I just, and Ashley makes a wonderful argument. The element that's missing in the argument is procedure and protocol. And that's where it's been lost. The board, and that's why I was making the point that I was making prior, because I wanted to make sure that I understood exactly what we were dealing with, is that, again, a very specific and low impact permit, which was agreed upon by staff, was purely to allow a pole to come through a roof, and that was it. And once a decision was made with regards to where to go from that point, because of the neighborhood that it sits in the Ashley River Bridge District that it resides in, that the aspect of demolition and the ability to evaluate the aesthetic contribution contextually as a whole to the entire neighborhood comes then before the design review board. And as a result, the design review board not only was never given that opportunity to evaluate it, but in fact now being asked without any aspect of future consideration that in spite of a breach of trust that has been created, that we did it, let us go forward. And I think it's just absolutely setting the wrong precedents here as far as what we might do in the future with others. We just heard and had a dialogue, I guess, within the last year on a project on the other side on Savannah Highway that dealt with very specific and related issues such as this, that the board stipulated that the contribution of a structure was significant in terms of the contextual relationship with everything. This building in the photograph that I'm seeing right now, typically we ask for context from the applicant to get a better sense of it all. But I mean, this is not an unusual structure for this neighborhood, to be honest with you. And the other flip side is, as Ben has said, and I was saying before, is now that a significant amount of the building has been removed, if you've exceeded that 50% rule, the building department may come back and demand that everything be upgraded to current flood and life safety issues, which will have a rather significant aspect on the evolution of this structure. So consequently, because of the actions that have been taken at this point in time, we may see the whole structure having to be demolished, again, without any input from the design review board. I'm going to just...
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Dinos.
Another question.
Building official, or it's a slippery slope.
It is.
We've removed so much of it already. Sorry, Erica.
That's okay. Ashley very eloquently said a lot of the things that I was thinking and trying to figure out how to present to the board. And so thank you, Ashley, for that. I agree with a lot of your concerns. And one thing I don't understand, and I don't know, David, maybe you're the person to answer, but if the board denies the request, we're in effect requiring them to build it back as it was. But what does that even mean? I mean, how is that judged? Are we saying you have to use the same materials? Are we saying you have to use the exact same geometry? Are you saying you have to, use the same wall construction methods? I mean, I feel like I don't even know. It's not something I'm necessarily comfortable voting for, because I don't even know what exactly that would mean and how that would be enforced, from I don't know what does that mean? I don't want to get too existential here, but saying to rebuild it as it was, what does that mean?
Good question. I'm looking at Dino, so I'm hoping he's going to be able to chime in. I don't know how to answer that.
I think that what the board is saying is that if the project had come in this condition of the photograph that we're seeing right now, and the extent of demolition was requested, and the board were to deny the demolition based upon the aesthetic contribution and contextual relationship to the balance of the neighborhood, then the applicant would be required to go forward with the aesthetics of what we're looking at here and planning the balance of his renovations and additions with this footprint in use. So that's the result of a denial of a demolition, that in fact, what they would have to do is, it's nothing more than what we would possibly do if it was denied before. If it were denied and coming before us, then they would take this footprint, they would take the floor plan, they would take the building, the architect, who is a wonderful architect, Red Iron, that they're working with, would be able to develop a design that would be compliant to the livelihood of the occupants. What we have missed out on at this point is that opportunity for commentary.
But if they decided to, or if something caused a full demolition, okay, let's say we allow, which I don't know that that's going to happen tonight, but we allow them to move forward with what they've done and say, okay, you don't have to rebuild it as it was. If they in turn want to demolish the whole structure, would that come back to us? Or by approving the request now, are we saying they can demolish whatever they want in the future? I mean, if we approve their request now, we're really only saying
the roof and the garage. We're not saying they can go and tear the whole structure down. That would still have to come to us if that were going to
That's my
happen.
understanding.
Okay.
It's a, you know, it's a very, well, and I know we all have to vote what we feel. I just, what is left? So let me ask you this. I mean, this is the position that I keep putting myself in. Okay. The applicant goes forward. He's removed the roof, he's removed back wall, and now he exceeds the 50% rule. He comes back to the city building official. The building official is telling him, because you've exceeded 50%, now you have to be in complete compliance with everything, including flood zone. So now they come back to us because we've approved the demolition, and now he's telling us that he has to demolish the whole building because of the work that we approved previously. That's the condition that we honestly are faced with right now. And that is very troubling to me.
Couldn't that be the case? Sorry to interrupt, Dinos, either way, you know, now that so much has been demolished.
I mean, now that the extent has been demolished, yes, but if long as they weren't exceeding the 50% on whatever was being renovated, they would not be subject to that. And, you know, the applicant was aware that there was flooding in the building. I mean, this is just going, this whole thing has just, to me, has, with all due respect, has just been handled without thought and regard to everybody else around. I'm personally struggling. I'm not trying to convince you otherwise, but I have great struggles with giving an approval, even at this stage. I think that the applicant would probably be put in a position to answer Aaron's question. If it were a denied application, then they would go back to the architect they're working with, and the architect would take the footprint and the format of what they've got with the profile that you're seeing right here and plan an addition and expansion with new materials that would be compliant if they're not exceeding 50% of the basis of their property. Madam Chair, I don't know, and certainly it can, if you would indulge me, I would be glad to make a motion
Okay.
for denial based upon staff's recommendation.
Any comments from staff or board comments to add, Dinos? So we have a motion for denial. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ben. Is there any further discussion? Ashley, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm struggling, Dinos, with what you were describing, because if we are talking about taking this steps further than we ordinarily would have as a board, according to the purview, because as the ordinance reads, we're not looking at the future plans. We're only looking at what's in front of us to consider the demolition, which, as we've identified, there are problems with that and is something that needs to be addressed. But as it stands today, none of those future factors are part of the decision. But I also wonder, go ahead.
I'm sorry, we would have influenced that decision though, if the demolition request had come before us, and if the demolition request to remove the roof and the walls, et cetera, were denied, then in fact, the planning process would proceed on the basis of this is what I have here as in situ material, and consequently I go forward with the plan. But by virtue, so do you under, it's a procedural exercise is where I'm arguing. It's an issue that the only thing that was approved before was just a pole through a roof. That was it. Understanding that any further demolition would be mandated to come before the board, And in fact, the board was not given that opportunity prior to the balance of demolition. And we've heard from the Moreland Neighborhood Association, Mrs. Jacobs, who is chairman of the Ash River Bridge District. I mean, they all feel the same loss that's going to occur. And I just have to agree with them. So it would have come to us prior to the roof being removed to allow us to make a decision as to whether or not there was sufficient value in the quality of the project. There's a difference in what you're saying, Ashley, and what I'm saying. I mean, I don't disagree that the applicant could probably do a magnificent job. And as I shared before, they have a wonderful architect. The issue is that this is not the way it's supposed to be done. And that, in fact, we are hearing from people within the neighborhoods that are saying, I mean, that live there, that are specifically saying that, in their opinion, that this project does contribute contextually and aesthetically to their community.
Well, actually, most of those comments were surrounding the precedent of this decision, which, again, you know, when we're making a decision, it has to be based off of the facts in front of us and what we know about the property at the time, and not thinking about what it could do for some other project in the future. And I think we're trying to make a decision here that really requires more ordinance language, and we're trying to punish an applicant as opposed to making the proper decision for
it's
that.
Not punishment. I would argue with you, this is not punishment. This is not, we're not trying to impose our will on the applicant at all. We're looking at this as if we would look at any project now that would come before us. Is the significance and the contribution of the aesthetic and character of the building to the neighborhood overall. And we would hear the comments that would come from the community as a whole, and then we would make our decision. I think it's not an issue of punishment as much as it is just what we typically do when we see demos like this come before us. And we may disagree on the aesthetic and the contextual nature of the building. You and I may disagree on that, and that's fine. But I think taking into account that the roof has already been removed and back walls have been removed, et cetera, in your decision is not what we should be doing as a board. And that's my feeling.
No, yeah,
we
I
should be
agree
looking at it.
completely. And I'm not saying we should approve it just because it's already done, to be clear. I think my stance is more that there's been a lot of discussion about how procedure wasn't followed and what kind of precedent this would set. And I think those things should not be part of the decision. And when I look at this from a preservation standpoint and thinking about individually what's best for this specific property and what architectural value this building does have and what should be preserved, I look at this from a different point of view.
I respect it.
I think I wish that this discussion tonight that we haven't even really talked about, like, yes, we've said that people think that this structure adds, integrity, but we aren't really talking about the demolition of the infrastructure overall, except, if things spun out of control, as Dinos has suggested. But I mean, we haven't even really talked about if changing the roof detracts from, the architectural integrity, the aesthetics, or if removing that one wall does. I mean, unless I missed that hasn't even been part of the conversation, which I think is what the conversation should be, more than procedure and everything.
I agree with that. I think and not to talk about the process, how it should be, but based on the process as it stands now, we really aren't allowed to talk about what the roof pitch would be if the applicant, based on what the applicant's proposing. I think we can talk about if the exterior building facade is demoed or the wall is demoed, that absolutely is able to be part of our conversation. But unfortunately, with the way the process stands right now, present day, we are not allowed to talk about what the roof pitch would be.
Right. But it could be if keeping the roof pitch as it previously was.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Erin. Yes.
That's
yes.
what I was saying.
I
if
apologize. I
keeping
thought
it-
you meant what he's
No.
proposing. in the roof pitch. Okay,
No,
sorry,
I
yes.
was saying, do we think that keeping that, we haven't even said whether keeping the roof as it was, and keeping that wall intact are architecturally important. And that's what I was
Got
saying.
it.
Yeah.
That's what our conversation
Well-
should be, in my opinion, which it really
Agreed.
hasn't been at all.
Yeah, and I think that's where we've been focusing, is the overall quality. I mean, I don't know how you can take a roof off of a building and try to just talk about the balance of the walls that are left. You have to look at it collectively and holistically. And that's what I'm saying, is that that it's impossible to get into. You have to look at protocol, guys. I mean, I have to look at protocol. I am forced into that to be able to understand it. I'm looking at this structure right now. If it came before me, and what would my position be if somebody had come in and say, I'm removing all of the roof, I'm demolishing a variety, over 50% of the exterior walls, which constitutes demolition to me, in essence. There's not a whole lot left afterwards. Obviously, a great topic for the next retreat.
Is it demolishing over 50% of the exterior walls? I
was looking at the plan. David, can you go back to the plan for a moment?
Yeah, sorry.
I must have
Exterior walls, I would
misunderstood.
say no.
Yeah, the entire garage is gone.
The entire garage is gone. Yeah, I mean, it's.
So
There we
what's
go.
highlighted is pink, and pink is what's been demolished. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yeah, but we do not have purview over interior walls. So it would
Right.
just be,
That wall along the bottom. Yeah.
I think, yeah, is if you're facing the building, the right side of the house. And I guess to Aaron's point, he knows to put you on the spot, or
Mhm.
Ben, does that wall contribute to the character and the value of the home from an architectural standpoint? I understand the roof.
Yeah, but see, it's from an architectural standpoint, and Ben may have another opinion with regards to this, and I certainly respect that as well. But what we are asked to do now is to dissect this structure to determine what constitutes a change in the aesthetics. And I don't think you can do that. As a practicing architect for all these years, you look at it holistically. You have to look at the entire structure and understand the manner in which it presents itself, and it's predicated on the aesthetics and everything that you have here. If we start getting into dissecting structures when demo applications come to us, then we're going to be recreating architecture. That's, yes, you can take down that left wall, but don't touch anything over here. It's not the way that you look at it holistically. If you're trying to justify an approval, yes, you can start doing things like that. But if you're really looking at this from what we are charged to do, which is, again, looking holistically at the contextual aspects of this overall structure, then you have to look at it holistically. You have to look at it just as that other photograph that showed the building prior to any demo would present itself. And you have to ask yourself, is this a project that I feel is sufficient to its contribution to aesthetics and the contextual relationship with the neighborhood? You can't look at it from any other aspect. It's just impossible to do from a board standpoint. And from my 5 or 6 years on this board as to the way we've looked at structures in the past.
Any further discussion? Okay, so we have the motion and the second on the floor to deny the after the fact demolition. I'll now call roll. Aaron?
This is a hard decision, but
It is.
I know I'm really torn on this. I'm really torn on this. I honestly don't know how to vote.
Want to come back to you?
I mean, I'm not going to change my mind in 5 minutes, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you can come back to me, that's fine, but I don't
Okay.
know. It's going to change my mind.
I don't believe Andy is here still. Ashley,
No for the denial.
Ben,
I was the second of the motion, so
sorry, thank you.
yeah.
Stephanie,
No for the denial.
Aaron,
This is really hard. I think I am going to vote in favor of the denial.
okay. And then I am also yes in favor, but agreed with you, Aaron. It's a tough one. This was not a simple one.
And I don't know that as a board, we were really put in a fair position on this one to make this
Not at
call
all.
for a lot of reasons.
The motion passes 4-2, the way I calculated it.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
I have
Ben.
a question. I have a question. Just moving forward with Andy not being here, what happens if it's a 3-3?
It's a great question, and in all of my years, it's never happened. So I don't know the answer. That may be a question for David.
So I'll provide some input unless David has a confident response.
I don't. Please.
So
answer.
according to Robert's rules, the chairperson is actually the tie-breaking vote. And the person who seconds the motion could actually vote against the motion after board discussion.
And I don't know, I know normally just based on municipality rules, typically if it's 3-3, even if it's chair, it typically the motion dies. So simple answer.
I think I missed Stephanie's vote.
Sorry, just said from a municipality standpoint, how we handle it from municipality world is that typically, even if it's like the mayor votes and it's essentially a tie vote, it typically fails. It just dies because you have tie vote.
No, I'm sorry. I was asking which way you voted.
Oh, I voted same as Ashley.
Okay. No,
Yeah, I had 4-2, David.
thank you.
That's
Okay,
it.
Next on the agenda is item number 2, Maybank Highway at Timberland Drive, requesting preliminary approval for a new Sphinx gas station and convenience store.
We've seen this project before. I don't have any context slides. So Ken, if you'd like to get started. Ken, can you hear me?
You may need to direct him to unmute, I think.
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
I don't envy the position you're in. I'm on the Board of Zoning Appeals in Greenville, and we have a lot of these same situations. So I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I hope we don't get one like that to deal with. So, but anyway, as far as what we've done here, we've taken the project that we had at Conceptual Approval, and we've addressed in our design all of the issues that were brought up in staff comments and board comments. And in particular, what we have done, if you look at the building, we've widened the end masses of the building. We've notched the corners in the building to be able to, let's just go to the elevations if you don't mind. I'm trying to keep this fairly brief. Yeah, there you go. This is a real comparison of what we've done with the building prior to, and and in particular, we took the end masses of the building and widened them several feet to make them, a little bit more of the massing of the building. We did notch the corners where the shakes and the board and batten siding intersect, so they intersect on an inside corner. We did added base trim to the board and batten siding so that we have the ability to terminate those materials at the ground line. And then we do have a fair amount, what you can see on some of the elevations due to the grades and some of the existing trees that Eric has asked us to save. We've gone back in and we do have a little bit of a parged block wall there to match those particular grades. We've also treated the openings on Maybank Highway, which were treated as service doors before, looked like service doors, and just made them storefront and eliminated those openings, put them internal to the building so you don't have doors opening out on Maybank Highway in that area. We've also extended the canopies over the storefront entrances and all to go beyond the storefront on either side. And as you can see, I think in the rendering, there are a series of existing trees that we've saved. If you want to look at that street rendering there.
Oh, sorry.
Go all the way to the very end. I think, David, would be the best thing, the renderings.
Sure.
Yeah, and you can see that is the rendering from the cast canopy side. And if you look at the rendering from the other side, you can see there that we have a number of trees that we've saved, and the grades there are very tricky to try to save those trees. So that'll give you an idea that we do have a little bit of a wall there at the base of the building. I think that these renderings sort of represent schematically the landscaping, but we've got landscaping plans that have been attached to the project. We've also created out in the plaza, created impervious pavement throughout. That was one of the comments that we had. So I think that we've addressed most all of those comments on the building. The site plan has not, and we've got on the phone, we've got Greg Minton, who's the Sphinx representative, and we've got Ron Felkel, who's the civil engineer with HLA, and Kat Stafford, who is the landscape architect.
I apologize. I'm realizing they still have the old landscape plan in here before it was updated. Gosh. I know I did send it to the board though, so they have seen the updated landscape. I apologize, it's not here. I don't know what happened.
Right, and I think that we've had meetings with the president of the neighborhood association. We had a meeting with the city council member who represents this area. Didn't really receive any comments from them. They seem to be very cordial to the project. And we've tried to really work very closely. Ron can speak to, we've had several meetings with TRC to try to go ahead and get all of our site planning issues taken care of. The gas canopy is basically, again, using same materials for the columns and for the standing seam roof, but try to give it a unique appearance that matches the building, goes with the building. We've also presented here building sections and wall sections to give you an idea of how materials stop and start, terminate, and put together a color palette for you that's reflected on the renderings and in those color samples that we provided. These are just some sample photographs of the materials, just to give you an idea of particularly the photograph on the far left is probably the most representative because it has the shake siding and the board and batten combination that we were trying to get to.
Anything else?
No, I think that's it. Wanted to just try to keep it brief for you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have one question on the site plan, David, if you can flip back to that. The
landscape.
No, it was the site plan that showed like the paving materials. And I think I might have just answered it in that rendering. It just wasn't right, that one. It wasn't clear to me because I wasn't sure if that was showing the canopy or if that's the ground plane under the canopy. But are y'all proposing pervious pavers all the way under the canopy, or is that concrete under the canopy?
It would be concrete under the canopy,
Okay.
pervious pavers everywhere else. Yes.
Okay, good. Just making sure that was the case. Okay. That's the only question I had for the applicant.
Any other questions?
I had a question, Madam Chair, Ben Whitener. Hey, Ken.
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
All right, man. All right. Hey, I read some of the comments from the neighbors today, and I was just curious, and maybe it's a civil question. If you guys had looked at different ingress and egress, seemed like a lot of people were commenting they would have wanted to see at least one entrance off of Maybank. But I was just curious if you guys had looked at that, and maybe it was not enough space or traffic concerns, not enough space from intersections.
Yeah,
I can take that, Ken.
okay, sure.
Yeah, this is Greg Minton with the Sphinx company, but with that, when we first went in to look at the project with the city staff and the TRC, it was established that all access would be from the existing on Timberland Drive. There was an access curb cut that's already in place to show where it would enter into our property. And there's an actual easement that runs across the property to Meeks Farm. But with the way the roads are set up, there's not any spacing on Maybank Highway. And then the access was already established, kind of what was going to feed this parcel when this was originally all developed with the community back there. This was zone general business, and all this was put in with the access already established.
Okay, thanks.
I had one question to piggyback off of that. One of the other public comments spoke to the fact that Meeks Farm is a private right of way, and just confirming that, and I guess this is more of a TRC item, but I assume that y'all have vetted the ability to use that right of way and that access point.
If there is a recorded easement that was part of the TRC comments far as that, and where that access drive is shown, there's an easement that runs through there to that Meeks Farm on those two parcels.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Dinos. If I may ask just a couple of quick questions.
Please.
Have y'all had dialogue and discussion with the neighborhood, people in that area?
Yes, sir, Mr. Dino. I did go and meet with Noah Bustle, who is the president of the HOA, to walk through our plans. The TRC had requested us to do that as part of this project. And I did meet with Noah to walk through it, to show him all the plans that we had, and kind of walked him through how we ended up where we are. He did not have any big concerns at that point. Went over information like traffic study, impact to the neighborhood, some of the reasonings for the orientation of the building on the road, which was, really part of the city design with the 75-foot buffer up there. But I did go through the whole plans with him as part of that.
Very good. Thank you.
And one quick question. On the rear of the property, the wood fence that's shown on the current site plan, is that new, proposed, or existing?
That's an existing fence that is there in place at the back of the residential. And then also per the ordinance, we have a 25-foot landscaping buffer between that fence and coming off the rear of our property. That's part of our design. But that
the buffer,
is,
though, that the pond is in the buffer too, correct? for the detention swale?
Well, the little detention swell is in that landscape buffer through there, but that's 25 feet. And it will be a swell with extensive landscaping. It's probably shown on the landscaping plan. We're doing an all underground stormwater system for the majority or 98% of our stormwater. We have an underground system designed for this.
And David, for clarity, because I want to make sure that I had some notes from the landscape plan I reviewed, and I'm not sure that I reviewed. I know there's a couple floating around. Did the proposed landscaping change? It was more graphic things, right?
It was just graphic.
The actual plantings and things are consistent between
Correct.
the two?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? With none, we are now in public comment period. We did receive a number of letters submitted, and as the previous application, I will only state who submitted them and if they were opposed or for the project, as they were all submitted to all of the board members in advance of the meeting for review. I also do want to note that the majority of the items discussed in the letters for those that were against the project were against the use, the land use of the project as a gas station. And again, as I stated at the beginning, and as I state every meeting, our board does not have authority over land use and zoning issues, traffic, flooding, anything of that nature. But with that said, the members of the public that submitted letters against the project: Jordan Minger, Amanda Peterson, Edward Burns, Chad Dillon, Rihanna Dillon, Carmela Mandela, Deborah Farrell, Stephen Baxter, Nicholas Falvo, Pamela Gage, Marnix Hugoworth, Sean Crisp, CM Councilmember Carl Brady, Leah Plumley, Peter Rubino, Sharon Tunucci, and Brandon Alexander. And then James Hudson submitted something in favor of the project. We do have a number of members of the public registered to speak. 4. So if everyone could keep that time to under 2 minutes or under, to make sure we stay within our 10 minutes of allowable public comment. So the first member of the public we have is Jordan Minger. He can be let in if he's here.
Allison was saying there were a couple names she didn't see. So
okay.
Jordan, are you with us? Can you hear us, Jordan? Let me look at that list.
How about Marnix Hugoworth?
Yeah, Jordan is not on here, and Marnix is not as well. I believe the third speaker, Peter Rubino, I believe this is him.
Thank you, Allison.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, so my name is Peter Rubino. I'm a licensed engineer. I live on 3009 Tugelo Street in Maybank Village. And I'm the one that asked the questions, a number of questions. One of my biggest concerns is I'd like to see the training plan and specifications for spill retention or mitigation. As a current design, even with the swale that the gentleman just talked about, any major spill has the potential to spread to the local houses or down our street and contaminate our ponds. This is a huge safety issue and a concern for the people living here. I still don't understand why the entrance wasn't off of Maybank. I understand that those 2 cutouts were originally put in there. But I also is the one that asked the question of that Meeks Farm Road is a private road. And as far as I know, the people that own that property haven't provided access to be used as an entrance or exit out of the gas station. The storage tanks and the safety valves are very close to the first house property line. I walked it off. It's about 37.5 feet from the property line on a straight line to where the tanks are. Now, the code says 50 feet from residential zoning district or 100 feet from within a dwelling. And the dwelling is not right on the property line, but those storage tanks are, to me, it looks like just barely 50 feet away. And if there's an issue with any spillage, it's right in back of the neighbor's house there. And I assume the operations are going to be more than 7 to 11, most likely a 24/7 operation, which puts all of the noise of traffic in and out of there, and the lights from the operations shining into the backs of the number of houses that are along there. The other question I had, I do know that Carl Brady, our councilman, did submit information against this proposal, and I guess one question to all the people on the board is, how would you like it if somebody came and bought up 2 lots in back of your house and put in a gas station?
Mr. Urbino, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are not allowed to talk about use. Again, we only have authority over design and aesthetics.
Okay. Okay.
But please continue. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, I guess the last comment I had was about the storage, which the gentleman just talked about, that they're putting a swale in there. And I guess my other question is, if you're doing an underground stormwater storage, where's the water going? You're just going to hold it in a tank underground? I just see this as a significant impact to the community. And you guys mentioned that as you looked at the previous drawings and stuff like that. And I see this as a significant impact to our community here. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Jameson Cox, is he on the call?
Jameson Cox?
Yes, he's here. I think he's just on mute.
Oh, I can still talk.
Hands raised on Jameson Cox. It's mute. There we go.
Better?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Jameson Cox here. I'm appearing on behalf of the St. John's Common Property Owners Association. This Property Owners Association has governance rights and responsibilities for 3 parcels, which are incorporated into the design before you. As viewed from Maybank Highway, these parcels are on the right-hand side. One of them is the Meeks Farm Road itself, which is a private road owned by the POA. And the other 2 parcels are the ones between that road and this convenience store. These parcels are subject to the recorded restrictions regarding use and improvements and changes and lands within the association. No request has been made to the Property Owners Association for any such changes. So that's a general objection. And more specifically, as to Meeks Farm Road, it is a private road. It has never been dedicated to the public, and it is maintained by the POA. So from this perspective, it would appear that they are trying to incorporate the convenience store into the Property Owners Association. The second objection would be to the proposed circulation, in that it creates a through passage from Timberland Drive all the way over to Meeks Farm Road. Again, a private road. We're not aware of any easement, which was mentioned, I think, by Mr. Menton earlier, that would allow that type of through passage. Next is that if these parcels being the C-store parcel, the primary parcel, is considered as one with the 3 parcels that are within the Property Owners Association, then this amounts to an unauthorized annexation of the C-store site into the Property Owners Association. And it allows fuel storage on site there at the C-store. Fuel storage is strictly forbidden by the restrictions applicable to the St. John's Common. Finally, I noticed on the site design that there is a signage area right there on that parcel next to Meeks Farm Road. Any type of signage has to be approved by the St. John's Common Property Owners Association. On these bases, the association objects to the design. I ask you to deny it.
Thank you.
Erica, can I ask one question?
Yes.
I wanted to ask Ken if there's a Mr. Rose on the design team. There's a Mr. Rose that has a hand raised, but I don't have him on my list. but I don't believe he signed up to speak beforehand. Is he,
Okay.
is he on the design team with you, Ken?
He's not.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to clarify for Mr. Jameson, what properties was it that you said that you represented?
Mr. Jameson Cox. Mr. Cox?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. What were the properties you said you represented?
Yes, thanks. How about if I give you the TMS numbers? Would that help?
It does not right now
Okay.
because I'm not able to access GIS.
Okay, well, let me just tell you. So
Okay.
it would be, as you stand in Maybank Highway and look at the proposed store, on the right-hand side, there are two parcels. They're back to back and they run alongside Meeks Farm Road. Those two parcels are within the Property Owners Association and subject to the restrictions.
And you represent the Property Owners Association as well, who controls Meeks Farm. Is that correct?
Yes, Ms. Chase.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Chairman, Madam, could you, in terms of the two properties, you talking about the ones with tax parcel ending in 293 and 551, or is he talking about across the way, across the street, where it says Spacey and Spacey Investments LLC? Is he talking about John and Betty?
Mr. Cox, are you able to see the screen that is
Yes.
shared currently in the call?
Yes, and I see the hand. That property right there says Amanda Hancock.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the properties. And then the one directly, I guess that would be south of it. The one that has the name Joe and Betty Ortiz.
Okay. 293. Okay, thank you.
Right, and the third parcel being the private road.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public comment period, which we are now in city staff recommendations.
Thank you, Erica. Oh, I'm sorry. Would I be able to ask Ken one more question?
Sure.
Ken, is there a reason that the center gable, the center gable that you see on the north facade and the south facade, is there a reason that it wasn't centered on the building? It was at the last presentation, and now it's a little off-centered.
Yeah, David, it was actually off-center in the last presentation, but in order to make the building work with the trees and all that we're working with, and also with the internal function, it just moves it a little further off-center.
Okay.
But it wasn't really centered before.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So staff recommendations, first some staff observations. The project is progressing nicely. The height, scale, and mass is in fitting with the area. Most all of the previous staff and board comments were addressed since the last review, except just a few. There were, which includes, there were little improvements made to the Maybank facing facade, other than adding a masonry base, which we do like. This helps ground the building. And there was no landscape added to the parking lot side of the building, but staff can accept this given the building overhang in this location. Staff comment number one, staff recommends that the center gable of the building, I'm sorry. I was recommending the center gable be centered, but I am going to take that comment off given Greg's last comment. Staff comment number two, staff would like to see some improvements made to the long facade facing Maybank Highway. We understand that the interior layout and coolers prevent transom windows, which we had suggested last time. Staff suggests one revision might be to extend the center shed roof at the entry to extend across most all of the front, or at least to the end of the gables. This could also serve as a covered area for tables and chairs along Maybank. Staff comment number three, some neighbors to the south have voiced concern over the gas canopy lights that will be located on the side of the site closest to their properties. And staff would like to see extra care taken by the applicant to screen the southern property line of the site. The applicants have a nice start to the landscape buffer of trees and shrubs on the south lot line. We suggest adding some additional tall evergreens such as red cedars and hollies. And we also suggest an 8-foot tall screen fence the fence, which is permitted in a GB borders next to a GB, which this is. This would need to be worked out with the neighbors to the south to replace their existing 6-foot-high fence at this location. A photometric plan has not been provided at this time, but staff will be asking for this. And we'll be looking for foot candle levels to stay within DRB standards. We allow very minimum light to spill over the property lines. So we will be looking for this. The applicant to please review DRB lighting standards found online and provide the to the lighting engineer designing the site. Staff comment number 4, staff does approve of the proposed color scheme. Staff recommends preliminary approval with the condition to study further the north facade that faces Maybank Highway with final review by the board.
Thanks, David.
Eric, is it appropriate to make just one comment though about those things?
Yes, just one moment. Yeah, we are now in a time where you have 5 minutes to respond to city staff comments and then public comments as well.
I would like for Greg to address some of those comments having to do with the fuel passage in the adjacent property and the adjacent homeowners association. I will address one issue though having to do with the lighting. All of the lighting in that canopy is up in the upper portion of the slope, and it would not be visible from any of the residences, so you won't have any light spill over to the adjacent sites, and there's no other exterior lighting along that property line common with the residential area, so lighting will not be a problem. But we will provide the photometric study with our next submittal. That's in the works. Greg, would you like to address some of those other comments?
Yeah, I would like to try to address those. First thing I wanted to, Mr. James, I believe, had brought up the setback on the petroleum spacing from the residential in the back. And as we work through this design with the TRC committee, currently the property that we're building on is zone general business, which is where all of our development for the convenience store is. And the actual residential homes behind us are still zone general business, but we are meeting the guidelines that are set forth with appropriate setbacks as far as tanks, gasoline tanks, and petroleum equipment based on the ordinance and codes, which you can see represented when you see those hatch line circles. Those are the dimensions that we had to ensure that all of our petroleum equipment or canopies were out of that circle there to meet the proper spacing. And I know the concern he had mentioned, one of them did on the containment for fuel spills. All of our petroleum systems are a double wall system that are monitored constantly. They meet all state DHEC guidelines, and they're double wall tanks, double wall piping with monitoring sensors that track and record that. So we are very conscious and have a approved state system that we use throughout multiple locations, but it's state of the art because we do want to protect from any type of issue that would occur. That's why the double wall containment helps with that, all the piping and tanks. To address the Meeks Farm being a private road, I will like to reach out to Mr. Cox and then also our attorneys. The two parcels that they brought up, one is limited business, which is the first parcel up front is own limited business, and the other is business park. But I will reach out to Mr. Cox to touch base and try to address those concerns, and also with our attorney to confirm the language of that easement. We do want to make sure that we are, being good neighbors here. And I'll look to reach out to the St. John's Commons to create a dialogue to see how we can work together. I'm trying to think if there was other items that I needed to address, but the big thing I think we've designed this to be part of the community there. And we feel that we have made it blend in. We've been working with the TRC for the past 12 months to make sure that all the design and with the design review board, this is going to be a feature that will be a nice addition for this parcel. And this parcel was also identified as one of the hubs for this Maybank quarter for commercial development, which is why this property is zoned general business. And then that does allow us to have this use, but we want to do it in the right way.
Yeah, you don't, thank you. You don't need to comment on use. Again, that's not in our purview and a non-issue with regards to our board.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. I think that's everything we have.
Thank you. So with that said, we are now in board discussion. If anyone has any comments or motion.
Erica, this is Dinos. May I just ask one question?
Sure.
We have, was it July? This project came before us for conceptual approval.
Correct.
Were there any, was there opposition at that time for the project when it came before us?
I don't recall any.
No, there was nobody who submitted letters at that time.
Okay, so in essence, the height, scale, mass, and general use of the property and all were publicly debated and approved at that point, as we typically do with DRB. That really wasn't a question; it was more of a statement. And the other issue is that as we are at preliminary approval, and one of the things that we always ask regarding applicants are concerned is that as a board, there are no subject variances that are being required in order to advance the project, to our knowledge. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay.
We have not asked or gone before any variances at all for the project.
Okay, so everything in accordance with the TRC and the city jurisdiction, that everything that, and I'm just trying to make sure that as a board member, I understand this, that everything that we're looking at is in compliance with our abilities to move forward with the decision.
Yeah, I think the only thing brought up this evening that could be a potential issue, but in my opinion, really isn't under our purview, is the access on Meeks Farm.
Okay.
But I think that should not impact our review and recommendations. That really is something that should be handled with staff TRC and not with our board, since we're more design focused.
And I would agree. And I would agree, Madam Chair. My only concern too with that is that, of course, if there is some concern with having access off of Meeks Farm Road, that really would change the design of this building.
Correct. And I think they would have to then come back to us
right
if something does change. Correct. Absolutely. And I think the way David's motion reads is that the final review would come back to us, which is not typical for projects. Final reviews typically done at staff level. But it looks like David's recommending it comes back to us, probably for a number of things, lighting being one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I just had a couple comments. I think the building, I have approval for the building. I don't have any comments on the building. I think it's a fine building, would be nice on Maybank. I understand concerns of the neighbors, but most of that stuff is a zoning and TRC's purview. I do like where David's coming with adding more vegetation, dense vegetation on the southern perimeter. I think we should definitely do that, and the landscape architects could mention that more. But and maybe something that's a taller, but maybe a brick masonry or something kind of fence that does prevent, or at least it gives it a better physical break from the wooden fence that's there now. But other than that, I would be in for approval.
Agreed on the rear buffer, Ben and Aaron. absolutely can comment on it. My question or concern was I don't know the condition and the age of the existing wood fence. So that was one of my comments, which is covered by staff's comment to replace the fence with something more substantial anyways.
My understanding is that the fence is fairly new when the houses were built.
But if the fence is on the residential property, I think that we could require something on this property potentially, or request that it be included. And I think it's unfortunate. I don't know if there's a way to design around it that the bulk of that buffer is consumed by a swale, because that does limit what can be planted in it. I'm not sure how that can be reworked, because I know that gets into stormwater and engineering, but it's hard to have the really dense buffer intended there when you have the bulk of the space being consumed by a swale that can really only have grasses and things planted in it. I do think too, I agree with the statements made. I think in addition, further attention in the landscape should be placed to the area between the store and Maybank. I think that is a little lacking from a landscape perspective as well, on the front side of the property. And I would ask that, just that whole frontage, both between the building and the property, and once you get past the building, be reconsidered from a landscape perspective. And then the plant selections, I appreciate that most are native. That's great. But I do think that a little more, several of the plantings are deciduous. And then some of even the evergreen plants like the Ilex glabra and the podocarpus aren't always the most robust evergreens. And so I would just ask that they reconsider both the plant palette and the location of some of those plantings to create a more robust landscape along the perimeter of this property.
And to echo on your point, Aaron, I was looking at the grading plan in that area, and there is about a 3-foot grade change between the bottom of the swale and top. So just to be cognizant of that, the slope with regards to the plantings. Any other comments or motion?
Yeah, Madam Chair, in recognition, this is Dinos, and truly understanding our jurisdiction as far as approval processes are concerned, clearly I would move for preliminary approval as stated by staff with conditions 2, 3, and 4. And Ben, would you like to elaborate, or Aaron, on the fencing along the property line there?
I just think there should be more of a substantial fence on the southern side adjacent to the residential properties. And I think that was number 4. I think that was David's number 3, but okay. I think it would be better if it was not a wooden fence. It was something more substantial.
My concern with if we do something more substantial, I don't disagree with that, but the only
you can't do it in that retaining area. Is that why? Because of the grade?
Well, there's maybe space to build a masonry wall between that swale and the back property line, but that's really the only area that they have for plantings, so if you add the masonry wall, it takes up more space than wood would. 22. I mean, yeah.
I guess I'd be fine. I'd be fine with it if as long as they planted it densely, I guess. I know we're not supposed to count on trees, but I get the residents. I mean, I get it. They don't want to be right up against the gas, even though that's not in our purview. It's a gas station, so the better they can screen it, the better for the residents too.
I would agree with that, Ben. I would think as a resident, I would prefer a little bit more sturdier retaining wall as opposed to landscaping. I would like to add landscaping there, but to me, a wood fence over time, it just falls. It does a lot, and I know a wall would be more ideal.
So we want to expand on item 3 with a masonry fence or a fence of equal substance,
Yep, that's
whether
good.
it's stucco or. Does that work, Aaron, Stephanie?
That works for me.
Okay.
I'm struggling with that one because I mean, to Aaron's point,
Mm-hmm.
if it was my house next door, my preference would actually be more plantings.
I guess
Okay.
study it. Could we say
Yeah.
to
I think
study it?
study
Yeah.
it and see if you can engage with the neighbors to see the ones that immediately abut it and work out something, again, obviously other than no gas station, that would
Okay.
make them
As-
as happy as
So-
possible.
And when we say study it, I think that should extend into having, if there's a way to adjust it so that the whole buffer isn't consumed by a swale. You know, I think that whole area just deserves some more attention.
Yeah, the drive aisles, especially in between the fuel pumps and the parking, are very wide. So I wonder if you could pinch that a few feet. I mean, even gaining a few feet would be very helpful. And just kind of shift some of it up a few feet to give some additional width back there. Okay, so to recap, that one comment would be for the board comment to further study the rear buffer area
To provide a better screening to the neighbors.
to provide a better, more substantial screening.
To the neighbors, yes.
Okay. Is there any other board comments?
I had mentioned, and I don't know if Dinos wants to include it in his motion, but also restudying the landscape along Maybank.
Yes, thank you, yes, please.
And a separate comment in addition to that would be consider more robust evergreen plant palette than what is proposed.
Anything else to add for a recap? Okay, so a motion on the table for preliminary approval, and Dinos, all the conditions David listed included, which would be the
2, 3,
condition to
and
study.
4.
Except for one.
Yeah,
right.
don't.
It was study further
yeah.
the north facade that faces Maybank Highway with final review by board, along with staff comments 2, 3, and 4. Board comment number 1, further study the rear buffer area to provide a more substantial screening to immediate neighbors. 2, restudy landscaping along Maybank. And 3, consider a more robust evergreen plant palette. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ben. Any further discussion? With none, I will now call roll. Aaron,
Yes, in favor.
Ashley,
Yes, in favor.
Stephanie,
Yes, in favor.
and I am also yes in favor. We will now move on to agenda
Thank
item
you.
number
Thanks,
3.
everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Thank
See
you.
y'all.
3486 to 3492 Maybank Highway, requesting conceptual approval for a new multifamily development.
Thank you. I don't have any context. I might not have Allison anymore. Let me see. I need to let these folks in. Give me just a moment.
Hello, this is Laura Helminski with SGA and W Design. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Laura. Yes, hi. Thank you.
Wonderful. We've also got Steve Farmatino from Middleburg Communities on the line as well.
You just let me know when you'd like me to advance the slides.
Okay. David, am I ask you to go to the handful, I think there's 6 vertical sheets that have DRG's logo in the top right-hand corner. They demonstrate the before and after exhibits.
Sure. Before and after for site or buildings?
They're the site plans.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I know.
They're enlarged site plans.
Sorry, it's a little slow.
That's okay. They're big files. There
we
you
go.
go. That sheet, perfect. So I want to start with,
Sorry.
no problem, with the board comment number 1 regarding the landscape and plantings, just because we're going to see some pretty good examples of the revisions that were made across the next handful of sheets. So I'll set the narrative for that discussion as needed. But the overall revised design strategy as it pertains to the landscape and plantings was to create groupings that are similar in species and similar in general shape that will provide a unifying pattern across the site, while also providing a variety of planting material to avoid monotony across the large site. Where before each unit really was planted with its own unique identity, we believe that this strategy utilizes a kit of parts, so to speak, being the size and similar species that help unify the site. The new beds and groupings were designed to frame and accent the adjacent architecture, and where applicable, to take advantage and complement the existing trees and tree canopies. In areas with more space, where we were able to create more open space, we used larger but similar plant groupings, again, species and general shape, and added benches to create passive green spaces throughout the site. I'll note too that some of the species were revised from the previous submittal to be more common to the area, more indigenous to the area, and from the preferred plant list. So this sheet here, we're looking at the before on top and after of pod 6 and partially pod 7. Pod 7's on the next sheet. Notably at pod 6, we removed and relocated a handful of the units to provide a more central courtyard and green space overlooking the wetland. So we opened up in this sheet south, we opened up that centralized courtyard. Yep, right there, David, thank you. If you flip to the next sheet, we'll slide over and look at pod 7. On this one, we rotated the townhomes that kept the ends of this pod to be parallel with the street in order to provide a green corridor there through that pod, providing interconnectivity between those units of that pod and a shared outdoor space. Exactly. Thank you, David. And if you flip to the next sheet, we'll look at pod 11 and 2 sheets subsequent to this, pod 12. In these 2 pods, we decreased the unit density and spread out the townhomes to give more green space between each of the units, the townhome units, including, if you flip 2 sheets, David, new pocket park up in the point of that site plan. It's got a round walking path in there as well. So in these sheets, you can see those kit of parts, as I'll call them, of the plant materials design scattered throughout those larger green spaces. Again, similar species, similar shape to the unit kit of parts. And then if you go to the next sheet, David, we've addressed the orientation of the clubhouse. Most notably is that the building facade is now, we rotated the whole building 90 degrees so that the front building facade is the view terminus as you come in that main entry into the hamlet from the Maybank entry. The front porch rotated at the 90 degrees. We believe the front porch and windows give it a nice pedestrian scale along with that vehicular terminus view. The siding of this allows us, where it is currently situated, allows us to preserve a lot of those main trees that were not, the grand trees that we're not able to remove. The pool, you'll notice in this orientation, was not able to be centered on that main club. It is now centered on the fitness wing of the clubhouse. So we added an additional park behind the main clubhouse mass. And then there is another additional pocket park between the main drive-in and that unit up in the top left corner of the after. So we're able to provide additional green space, outdoor amenity green space. The clubhouse, which was situated sort of, I guess, bottom center, a little bit to the left, has now been relocated up near the trash compactor, near the Hayes Park entry piece, so that it didn't obscure that terminus viewpoint into or of the clubhouse while pulling into the neighborhood from Maybank. I think that I'll keep it short and sweet unless you have additional question. I think that covers the major revisions to the site plan.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? With none, I do not think we had any public comments for this item. So we are now on staff comments, please, David.
Sure. Thank you, Erica. This project has progressed nicely. It's made some good improvements. Most notable, the clubhouse has been oriented to face towards the entry drive, which we feel is much better and gives more of a sense of arrival to the project. We feel the height, scale, and mass of all the structures are appropriate for this area and will fit in harmoniously. The density for the pods indicated by the board have been reduced in density a little as asked, although pod 7 does look a little more dense to us with this submittal, but we do like the result of rotating the townhomes to face the main drive in this pod. The added renderings have aided much in understanding the overall design. The color schemes are really nice and balanced. Staff comment 1 is that staff feels the applicants have advanced the project enough for conceptual approval, so we do recommend conceptual approval.
Thanks, David. Did the applicant team have any items they'd like to clarify or respond to? Assume that's a no. So with that, we're now in board discussion and a motion.
Laura, let me see. Laura's got her hand up.
I put that up just right as the discussion was starting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay. I'll lower it. My apologies.
Sorry.
No problem. Did you have anything you wanted to clarify or respond to, Laura?
No, thank you though.
Okay, thanks. We are now in board discussion and a motion.
This is Dinos. I just would really like to thank the applicant for really digging deeply into the comments that the board offered the last time. And I do believe that it's an extremely successful project, very vernacular. I think it works well within the context of John's Island. And I know it'll be a great addition to the community.
Thank you, Dinos.
This is Erin. I agree. I appreciate you taking our previous comments. I think the landscape is really come a long way. My only comment would be that some of the ornamentals, I think there's some native alternatives that could be used just to keep the palette a little more native focused, but overall the landscape concept is really nice.
Erica, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion for conceptual approval.
Okay, great.
With comments, board comment, or staff comment number 1, is that right? Just one comment? And Erin, help me out, the native alternatives to study that instead of the ornamentals.
Correct, just study incorporating more native alternatives into your ornamental plant palette.
Sorry, say that one more time, Erin. Study incorporating more native.
Alternatives into your ornamental plant palette.
Anything else, Ben?
Nothing else.
Okay. So we have a motion for conceptual approval, and I don't think I need to include staff comment one, if that's okay, Ben, since it was more just,
Yeah,
it wasn't.
it's just a comment.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay. And then board comment number one, to study incorporating more native alternatives into the ornamental plant palette. Is there a second?
I second.
Stephanie, I think I heard you first. Any further discussion? None, I will call roll. Erin, I assume that's yes in favor.
Yes, in favor.
Thanks. Ashley?
Yes, in favor.
Dinos?
Yes, in favor.
And then I am also yes in favor. So we will now be moving on to agenda item number 4, 1475 Folly Road, requesting preliminary approval for a new automotive repair shop.
Thank you, Erica. I don't have any context, so I will turn it over to Thomas Duggan.
Yes, this is Thomas Dugan.
Sorry, Thomas, I get that wrong.
Oh, it's okay. No problem. We're the civil engineer for this project, and I'll go over the site plan and grading plan changes, and then I will hand it off to Larry Lesser, who will speak to the landscape, and then Dana King will speak to the architectural changes. If you could go to the next slide. So we have revised the grading plan. Previously, we had an infiltration trench that had a river rock cover. We have modified that to be a turf grass cover. We did look at doing a full depth bioretention area, but due to the difference in void space and stone versus the filter media that's required for the bioretention, we just weren't able to get enough volume for stormwater management. Additionally, in order to do a bioretention facility, there has to be a minimum depth of that filter media, and then there has to be an additional depth between the filter media and the water table. Just given the restrictions we had on site with the water table elevation, we weren't able to get that full depth. But it will be a turf covering, so aesthetically it'll be more vegetated. And as far as the site plan goes, there were no major changes. We just made some minor modifications to accommodate the revised building footprint. Yeah, next slide, please. Could you go to the next slide, please?
Oh, I did.
Oh. Yeah, so nothing changed on the utility and this. And
Sorry.
I think there might be a little lag on my end, so sorry about that. If you go to the landscape plan, I'll let Larry speak to the changes.
Thank you, Thomas, and good evening, everybody. So there were 3 big areas that we've heard the comments on and we want to touch on. The first area is the seating area out by the front, and that's right on the front facing Folly Road. We're a little hemmed in between utilities and grading and the trees that we needed. There wasn't too much room. But what we did do is we managed to include a walkway along the building that goes out into the landscape with a small bench area. We've tried to orient the bench so that it looks out into the landscape as opposed to straight out into the road or straight out into the drive entry. Gives it a little bit more of a pleasing view. The bench area is also somewhat buffered from both the street view and views both in and out of the seating area. The shrubs tend to be around 3 feet tall. There's a little bit of a taller backdrop to it. Also, it is partly shaded because between the trees and the building itself. It'll never be in full hot exposed sun, but it'll be a light area. It won't feel dark at all. The next area I want to touch on is the northern side of the building. It's a bit of a screen. And I have to say that I noticed just moments ago that the evergreen shrubs that we added didn't in fact come out on this plan. They're called out, but the symbols didn't show up. So my apologies for that. All right. So those blank areas actually contain a number of evergreen shrubs. In this case, I used junipers. I've been thinking about using inkberries, Ilex glabra, because it's a native option. But especially after hearing the comments that have been made, we're probably not going to go that direction. That said, it is meant to be a more loose, more open, more native area on the north side. We still have the taller shrubs, the viburnums and the hydrangeas, but I've also included some lower shrubs and junipers. Also try to keep them further north to the edge so that they will be much less likely to be shaded out. The third area that I want to touch on is the ponds. And you can see that we're showing the ponds vegetated not only at the bottom of the pond, right there, right? We're also showing a number of grasses around the edges. They're species that both echo the rest of the landscape in the front and give a little bit more immediate impact close to the parking. None of them are close enough to get run over by cars if there's any overhang, but they're also large enough grasses so that they will both put on a nice show and give some good color as well at various times of the year. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
I also wanted to add regarding the screening of the condenser unit, there's also a screen wall there in addition to the shrubbery. So there's 2 levels of screening for that condenser unit. And Dana, would you like to speak to the changes to the building?
Make sure she can see. I think she's been allowed to talk. That's to unmute. Let's see, Dana, can you hear us? It looks like you're able to speak.
This is Dana King. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yes, this is Dana King representing the architect. Sorry about that. I'm on the phone, so I don't have the screen in front of me, and I'll do my best by memory.
I've got the comparison elevations up now.
Okay, excellent. So we left the main roof structures the same, but we removed the exposed rafter tails and created just a solid fascia around the building to hopefully give it more of an industrial type feel. And most of the changes made on the outside were towards that aesthetic idea. So the roof fascia line and eaves all changed to be solid. The color of all of that is now the same to match the color of the metal roof. Then on the office portion of the building, we added 4 foot deep and 4 foot projecting from the building awnings, about 12 inches tall. And each awning has 2 tie backs that go back to the face of the building. And then the windows are still the same height, but below the windows, we've created a panel look so that the full picture of the fenestration matches the same sort of image of the garage door. And so each window has an awning. The main door to the office has an awning, and then those wrap around the office so that it's the same look as you go around the building. And they should be deep enough that they should allow for plenty of cover. So if anyone's standing outside, they're covered. And then we did add a masonry screen wall on the back of the building to cover all of the utilities, including the condenser unit. But I think that covers most of the building changes.
Does anybody have any questions about the revisions?
Thank you. Yep. Any questions from the board?
Madam Chair, I have a question. To the architect, I was just curious, we had talked about having larger overhangs earlier on in conceptual, and I think you provided that. And yeah, we had asked about the rafter tails, but it looks like now that the overhang's been almost halved. at least a foot has been, it looks like at least a foot's been taken out. It's easier to see, David, if you scroll to the right. Yeah.
Yeah, over the course of the project, you're correct. They have changed the depth of that roof overhang.
I was just curious.
But in this current,
why? I was just curious.
Well, in this current design, they were shortened because there are awnings over every window and the front door. So if the extension of the roof eaves wasn't necessary for protection from weather.
Do you have any additional questions, Ben?
No other ones.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions? With none and with no public comments, David, staff comments, please.
Thank you, Erica. Staff observations. The applicants have addressed the big issues of improving the office end of the building with administration that mimics the garage doors and eliminating the rock ground cover and the detention pond, introducing native grasses to the pond. The applicants have added extra screening on the north-facing mechanical units, including a fence. Staff comment 1, staff feels the applicants have satisfied the staff and board comments and can move forward. Staff actually recommends final approval with staff to sign off on full MEP set at the time of obtaining a building permit, just to make sure that they include the more detail that we expect at final. Staff recommends no mock-up panel for this no mock-up panel required for this project, and we do recommend final approval.
Thanks, David. Does the applicant or anyone on the applicant team have any items to clarify or respond to?
There's nothing from the civil end.
Okay. We are now in board discussion or a motion.
This is Erin. I just, in response to what the landscape architect said, just for the record, want to clarify that we're not opposed generally to Ilex glabra, especially in a naturalized buffer like what you're proposing. It's very appropriate. It can be a looser habit, so it's not great for evergreen massing, but in a situation like yours, we love it. So just to clarify that comment.
Good to know. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I had a comment. It goes back to pertaining to the roof overhang again. I really feel like for a building this massive, it should have a little bit more of a 1'6" overhang. That's why I was strongly suggesting it in the previous submittals, and I think they hit it. I think it was there in the last submittal. That's why I asked the question why it was reduced, but it was on all of the different masses. So I appreciate that awnings have been added to the front piece, but awnings weren't added to the backs or anything, and it just didn't make sense to why they got reduced. I personally feel that it works better with the proportion of the large width of the masses behind, and I'd like to see them come back.
And this is Dinos. I would agree with what Ben is saying. I think that the applicant has, thank you, y'all. Dana has really worked hard on a project that is so utilitarian and industrial, but I think that in the end, it's going to end up being a very attractive solution to this area. I would agree that the longer overhangs, as Ben was saying, would be quite appropriate as far as the building is concerned. The other issue is just the space in between. You can't see what I'm drawing on. is the space on the east elevation between the two openings. And I'm glad to see that there's no attempt to provide a tiny piece of fenestration there, but as you go forward with landscape and finalizing everything, maybe just keep an eye on how that area works.
Any other comments or a motion?
Madam Chair, if I can make a motion and everyone else help me, but make a motion to proceed forward with this project as recommended by staff. Dinos and Ben, are you okay with the overhang if they make some changes that either staff approves it or they just show it to you? I don't think it needs to come back to us.
Staff, I would just keep it the previous overhang.
Okay.
Keep the previous overhang, just not exposed rafter tails.
Okay, so if you can add that, Erica, that would be great. So I just make the recommendation with Ben's addition, and then what staff's recommendation is to approve this with final with no mock-up panel required.
Okay. So we have a recommendation for final approval with staff comments 1 and 2 and board comment number 1 to keep the previous overhang, but without the exposed rafter tails.
Correct.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Is there a second?
I'll second, Erin.
Thank you, Erin. Any further discussion? With none, I'll call roll. Dinos?
Yes, in favor.
Ashley?
Yes, in favor.
Ben?
Yes, in favor.
And I am also yes in favor. So we will move on to our last item, number 5, approval of the minutes from the January 3rd, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Dinos. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Stephanie?
Sorry, I second.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Stephanie. Any further discussion? I will now call roll. Erin?
Yes, in favor.
Ashley?
Yes, in favor.
Ben?
Yes, in favor.
And I am also yes in favor. And we are done.
Woo.
I'm glad we stepped up our pace after the first 2.
That first one, I thought we were going to be here all night.
Clock. I'm like, oh gosh, we're going to be here a while if we keep this up.
Great. It was excellent dialogue in that first one. And next time that Donna Jacobs suggests a robust conversation, I'm going to shoot her. It was absolutely well put together. And, it certainly gives us a lot more to think about and talk about, because so well stated on Ashley and Stephanie's side as well. So
I think
something good to
Ashley,
talk about.
you had so many great points, and I'll have to say that I don't think anybody else is on here.
Well, David, you still have us live stream, so if with meetings adjourned, you can actually stop the live streaming.
Yeah, we're live streamed and we still have attendees in
Thank
as
you.
well.
Well, we'll talk later.
Okay, but yeah, I do think that we're playing the hand we were dealt today, but I think for future, if there's opportunities